So this is, again, week 7, and we're talking about why participation, what is participant observation? And so within, again, qualitative research. All right, let's talk about the participant observations application in marketing. So when we're talking about participation observation, we're talking really to understand within marketing, we're really trying to understand the consumer behavior. That's essentially what we're looking for here. Now, of course, you're doing your research projects, so you're also looking to understand how your consumer or your target audience is behaving. So marketers essentially, they use this method to gain a deeper, more in-depth insight of how people react or interact with their products, with their services, and their brand in a natural setting. So you're not talking about a survey, you're not talking about maybe in-store experience, when you're leaving the cashier and they're asking you to, fill out the survey or whatever. You're actually looking to see what's the interaction. How do they feel? Do they want to leave as soon as they enter your store? What are they looking at? And so forth. So for example, if we're talking about retail, participant observation could be used to see how customers move throughout the store. With which section do they navigate or gravitate towards, how they respond to product placement, and which items they pick up but don't purchase, okay? This is all understood in marketing as you are observing the people. Because no matter how many times you ask, people forget what items they pick up, what items they look at and then put them down. You've done that so many times, especially when you're walking towards the register, playing with those little knickknacks that are there. And then finally you're like, okay, I'm gonna get this one. So why this one and not the other one? And so this is what we're trying to understand here in terms of marketing and in terms of consumer behavior. With, if you want an example in online ones, you are looking at tracking users' behaviors on website, analyzing how they stay, how long they stay on certain pages. If they click on your call to action button, if they abandon the process, or where they stop being part of that process. All of this is an implication of participant observations within marketing as well. All right, so let's look at the key elements of participant observation. I feel like you guys can't see this, so I'm gonna zoom in. Is that better? How we feeling? Beautiful.
I don't know what a little bit.
Well, I'm glad. All right, so we're first and foremost location. So physical and social settings of participant observation is crucial. So to truly understand the behavior of someone, you must observe it in the natural context, or as natural as possible. So when it occurs organically without artificial constraints. An example would be if you're studying consumer behavior in a grocery store, you probably should be in the grocery store, right? You need to study them there, whether it's you get the consent and you study them through cameras or whatever. You can, you have to be in the store. You can, in that example, you'll watch how people are navigating the aisles, how they're selecting products, how they interact with store employees, and how they react to in-store promotions. Okay, so these are all observations. The next thing that you want to do is building rapport. And so it's an effective way for participants to become more trusting of you, and for them to let down their guards, and for them to act normally when they're with you. So in that sense, gaining trust doesn't really happen overnight. It really requires time and effort. So you need to be able to create and foster that sense of relationship with the people that you are observing. Time investment is a very big thing. And so this is a time-intensive method. This is why we survey 100 people, but we cannot observe 100 people. We cannot observe these 100 people. So we'll select 5 or 6 of them. Why? Because it's very time-intensive. And when you take time with a person, you're then able to see patterns, you're able to see seasonal behaviors, you're able to see cultural rituals and how they interact with these products or services, all right? And how they interact with whatever it is that you're trying to research and study. You also get to capture the had to be there phenomenon, which is the idea, when you tell a joke and it's really funny, but you had to be there, that's exactly what this is, okay? You had to be there to understand and fully be present in that place. So this would be nonverbal cues during negotiations that might not translate well into words. They can be captured in how and where and why people say them. What kind of reactions do they have? Sometimes you look at someone, you're like, that's really salty, right? Look at someone and I know you're saying nice words, like the words are nice, but I don't think your intentions are nice, right? But if you're writing those words down, they'll be like, oh, this person's so nice. But you had to be there to see that their reaction was really actually a negative one. Make sense? All right, capturing unspoken rules and norms. Implicit rules, they are unspoken rules that dictate how people behave. So these rules may not be codified or even consciously recognized by participants, but they do them because that's the thing to do, right? That is a cultural thing to do. It's an unspoken rule, but it exists. And we've seen them. We've been part of groups that do this, whether it's in our family, something happens, how many people here get presents on Christmas? Okay. Okay. Whether used to or not, in the past or in the present, raise your hands. All right, brilliant. Now tell me, of the people who raised your hands, how many people opened them Christmas Eve? How many people opened them Christmas morning? All right. For you who opened them Christmas Eve, that's typically an unspoken rule in your household. For the people who open them Christmas morning, that's typically an unspoken rule in the household. Okay? And it's so normal to you. The normal thing to do is to open them Christmas morning or to open them Christmas Eve. Does that make sense? So do you see how this plays out? Okay? So when you're there and you're observing, you get to observe that. Because if someone comes up and tells you, oh, well, did you open presents last night? And you're like, that wasn't really Christmas. Tomorrow's Christmas. What are you talking about, right? You've had those moments with people before or similar situations in other places. That would be this. Okay? Cool. Do you see how it is? Yes? All right, beautiful. So those would be implicit rules that that people have. Efficient learning. So while this is interviews or surveys might rely on participants explaining the rules of norms in their environment, they may not always be able to articulate them. This is where participant observation is actually invaluable, and it is so important because it allows the researcher to see the norm in action. So for example, by observing a team meeting over time, a researcher might notice that certain individuals constantly speak first, or that decisions are often made informally after the meeting concludes. Okay, so that would be if you were to ask the participants and they were to tell you, they wouldn't know what to tell you because it's so ingrained that this is the normal for them. So they would not even see it as something that needs to be noted. Does that make sense? Like in the case of the group meeting, it's obvious that so-and-so speaks first and everyone waits for that person to speak. Does that make sense? Yeah? You guys see it in your day-to-day life? You see how you have the skills and you can just transfer them and not put them into groups and put them into the process? Yes? Awesome. All right. All right, so revealing unconscious actions and calculations. Again, Participant observation unveils routine actions and social calculations that really, as it says, they are unconscious. You behave in a certain way, and you're not even aware that you are behaving in that way. Yeah? So, anyone here walks to their door and takes off their shoes? Okay. Anyone here just walks through their house and without taking off their shoes? Okay. There's a lot of people. Either way works, guys. But if you are a type of person that takes off their shoes once they enter the home, it's something you do automatically, right? You subconsciously walk in, take off your shoes. It's not even noticeable, right? You don't even think twice about it. Does that make sense? That would be an unconscious behavior that you wouldn't think twice to tell people about it, right? So if I'm, yes.
When doing this research, like, what if you as the researcher, how do you become aware of all these unconscious behaviors and,
You're observing
no, what I mean, like,
by observing. So the idea is this, if
like
you,
completely from scratch, like.
no, okay, look, you are observing that person in search for something particular, right? You
I guess
have,
I need
okay,
kind of
hold on, no, hold on, let me finish. You have a person who is there, right?
Mhm.
And you are studying, you're there because you're studying a particular phenomenon. So you already know what you are looking for, and you're either trying to prove or disprove your theory or whatever the case is. Okay. So you're looking for particular patterns in behavior as to why something happens. The shoe example or the Christmas morning example is me trying to bring it closer to you guys because you haven't done research before. Yeah. So trying to give you an understanding of what it means to do subconscious behaviors that seem so normal that you don't notice them. Okay. That is not what the research, unless they're doing research on carpet, then they're not gonna care if you walk into your house with or without shoes on.
Right.
Okay, unless they're looking to see how many people in terms of marketing, how many people buy their presents Christmas Eve. If they're buying a present late, Christmas Eve or Christmas morning, then it really doesn't matter when you open them. Does that make sense? Yes? Cool. So my entire point is to just give you examples that brings it back to your things that are relevant or related to you or something similar that you've experienced to help us understand this material. Because I don't want this stuff to remain theories. Okay, it's really easy to have theories, but it's a lot harder to actually apply them. And if you already know that the skills are things that you have and you've experienced before, it becomes a lot easier for you to employ them in the future. Does that make sense? Yes?
I guess till I get a visual, it's just.
I don't have a visual.
No, I know.
Yeah, I'm sorry. All right. All right, so hidden rituals are also things that are ingrained in people's lives that they may not recognize as significant. However, these rituals can reveal a great deal about a person's priority, value, and or social identity. So for example, in corporate environments, employees might engage in small pre-meeting rituals like preparing a cup of coffee together, reviewing notes, adjusting their seats, and arranging things to make them feel that that they are prepared for this meeting. Okay, so that would be a ritual that they don't necessarily recognize to be a ritual, but this is something that is so habitual and that is done. This is what we do, right? We get together and we do that. How, and I'll give you an example from also day-to-day life. How many people here, I'm not promoting that you do this. How many people smoke hookah before? Beautiful. Yeah, you've had hookah, okay. Why? Because how many people are Arabs in the room? Right, just me. What is normal in an Arab community is when people are gathered in an evening is for them to sit around and drink some tea and smoke some hookah, right? And that is a ritual that they don't recognize that is a ritual. Unless I go and ask a different community, then I would not recognize that. Oh, wait, hold on. You guys don't do this? Yes, you've experienced that to a certain degree. If you come from a different culture and you live in the United States, you're like, oh, this is you. Okay, right? It's usually that interaction. It's not good, it's not bad, but it's that interaction. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's what hidden rituals are. That is what you can see from the meeting example, right? Anytime before a meeting, what do? You go make a cup of coffee, you get yourself ready, and you do this. That is a hidden ritual that you do not see unless you observe. Make sense? All right. Direct observation versus participant observation. An observer is under the bed, a participant observer is in it. This quote is from an anthropologist, and his name is John Whiting, and he emphasizes the critical differences between direct observation and participant observation. So direct observation, the researcher maintains distance and merely watches the behavior or event unfold. You're not really participating in this research. Whereas participant observation is a little bit more different. And the idea is that it requires immersion into this program. So the research becomes a part of that environment. They experience the behaviors and the event alongside the participants. So they're kind of together. And it is, the most critical distinction or more significant distinction between the two is their approach to data collection. How are they collecting the data? Within the direct observation method, the data is focused on, both of them really are focused on direct observation actually is focused on qualitative data, whereas participant observation is focused on qualitative data. And so the research here gathers data through experience. They gathered it through conversation and through subjective immersion, and often really just trying to capture the emotions of the people that are there and really connecting with them on that emotional level. And lastly, you're looking at if it's structured or unstructured. Direct observation is very structured. It follows a predefined categories and frameworks that will tell you how and what you are going to observe. Whereas the the participant observation, it has the exploratory or explanatory structure, which means that it's more flexible, it's more open-ended, it's more able to, the researcher is more able to adapt to the unfolding environment in the moment, right? What's happening in the moment, you have to react to it because you're participating in it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Questions? I love that I'm this skilled at teaching you that not a single one has a question.
You're doing a pretty
Good
good
job.
job at explaining stuff.
Thank you. I was kidding, but thank you.
I mean,
That was
I've
a joke.
had teachers that honestly can't explain stuff very good like that. I've met them.
All right, we talked about this already. But hold on. So direct observations, there's like a minimized need for the researcher to be there, so you can do it in recorded through video, audio, or tracking devices without requiring any human interactions. In some cases, like surveillance cameras or motion sensors, they collect the data automatically, so the person doesn't have to be there. And here the focus of the direct observation is observable original data. So it seeks factual descriptions, what is being done, how often, and under what circumstances. That's within direct observation. Now, when we talk about participant observation, again, this is a qualitative research method. It's more interactive, and we are, again, looking to explore or explain the research objective. So it's particularly useful when the researcher aims to uncover underlying norms, values, and social rules that govern a particular behavior. Okay, what is actually happening? Okay, so rather than testing a predefined hypothesis, participant observation allows the researcher to explore new concepts and generate theories based on their experiences in the field, okay? All right, so participant observation provides this unique data because the researcher is actively involved in the environment and they really just gain a perspective that they did not have before from an outsider, right? So once they go into it, they realize that there was this distance in them understanding, and so the experience is shaped by the relationships that are formed, the conversations that are had, and personal involvement in research, and that creates unique data that is unique to their experience. So I want you to think about think of a person that when the first time you met them, you're like, this person is not fun or not cool, or cast some kind of a judgment on this person. You have someone in mind, right? Great. Now, what I want you to think of is if you now have a relationship with that person, there was a shift from you seeing them the first time to you actually hanging out with them and finding out more things about them and feeling like they're a part of your group now, right? Yes? Can you recall that to mind? What happened in that scenario is that you were exposed to a new set of details. They're unique data points that you've collected on that person that made them more human, right? You're like, oh, this so-and-so is not so bad, right? They're actually pretty fun. Oh, I didn't expect them to think that way. I didn't expect them to like the same things I do. You know what I mean? Yeah. So this is where you start saying that, oh, like there's a difference because the data becomes unique and that you're no longer observing on the outside as you would have cast the judgment, one second, as you would have cast the judgment, you're now observing it from more interactions where you really understand things that you wouldn't have understood before.
Like for me, basically, it was just simply reaching, it was kind of being forced into a one-on-one conversation with them. Whereas if it's not a one-on-one, I see them from a distance.
No, it's not the same what we're talking about. So you're right. What happens, the example I'm trying to get to that person that I had you think of is that once you found out, I'm hoping that once you found out a little bit more about that person,
You mean from a distance?
No, directly. So from a distance, the first time you meet someone from a distance, you're like, oh, I really don't like this person, right? And then something happens and you encounter them once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, and you're like, oh, well, that person's not so bad. And you change the way you think about them. This is the same way this happens. Now, again, you guys, as a whole, my examples don't, they're not necessarily for everyone in this room, okay? I use different examples to bring certain points to certain people, okay? Cool? So not every example is for everyone that's here because I use multiple and different examples to help everyone in this room understand, and they're going to understand in a different way. Sound good? Okay? So it may not be your method of learning. All right, so reasons for using participant observation. These are 5 reasons by Bernard in 2006, and this is a researcher that came up with this. So collecting inaccessible data, so allows the researcher to collect data that would otherwise be inaccessible through surveys or interviews, as we talked about, like the behaviors and the norms and rituals that people might not be aware. Reducing reactivity. So over time, participants may forget that they are being observed and accept the research as part of their environment and really just let their guards down and truly become who they are. Knowing what to ask is very important because you know the person that's in front of you and because you've built a relationship with them, you know what kind of questions you need to ask them to solicit the information that you need to find out to understand what shapes their mind. Make sense? Yeah? Okay. Gaining intuitive understanding, so being immersed in the environment allows the researcher to develop an intuitive understanding of the group's norms, values, and behaviors. To bring this closer to home for a lot of you guys, a lot of you come maybe from immigrant households, yes? Yes, raise your hands. Okay. So when you walk into your home, you probably speak, and I presume that the majority speaks Spanish or Tagalog maybe, or in my case, it's Arabic, yeah? You walk into your home and there's a whole different culture as when you walk outside. So it's like you're American outside, and then you come back home and you're Lebanese American, or you're Mexican American, or you're XYZ American. Does that make sense? Okay. So here, there are certain things that that need understanding. So someone who is not Mexican American and they walk into your home, they may not understand them at first. But over time, as they continue, right, you have friends that are not from your culture, as they continued walking into your household, they started to understand your culture more, and they realized that, oh, when I'm here, this is how they behave. When I'm here, they don't eat toast bread, they eat tortilla, right? They don't eat toast bread, they eat sabes. Makes sense? Like pita bread. Yeah? Okay. And you, as the person who's participating in both cultures, you understand that there are certain things that you do in the overall American society that you would not do in your subculture at home or with your subcultural group. Make sense? Yes? This is the same thing in participation. And lastly, addressing unique problems, because now you are flexible and adaptable to understanding and to be able to react to those unique, unexpected problems that arise during research. Okay. These are some additional topics, but we're not going to go through them. No, we're not going through the example. I mean, we can't. Do you guys want to go through the example? Yeah. Wow, was it that interesting? Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're good. All right. So example of participant observation, study among injection drug users in Denver. So here the study highlights the particular value of participant observation and understanding complex social and health issues. By immersing themselves in the lives of injection drug users, researchers were able to observe behaviors and social dynamics that would have been missed through traditional methods like surveys and interviews. The Denver study specifically looked at drug sharing practices, uncovering previously unseen behavior that had significant implications for public health. Okay. So, in the observation, or the participant observation allowed researchers to gain in-depth qualitative insight to daily lives of drug users. It allows them to uncover the patterns of behavior related to health risks and that were not visible through other data collection methods, and provide contextualized information. Now, one of the key findings that they found in the Denver study is that while participants had largely stopped directly sharing needles, they continue to indirectly share behaviors. Okay, so this includes sharing drug preparation equipment, so things like spoons, cotton filters, water. All of this stuff was shared, which meant even though the needle itself wasn't shared, you still ended up with the same results or similar results. Okay, which carried significant health risks, particularly in transmitting diseases like HIV and hepatitis. All right. So with that, you can see that if people did not observe this study, they would not have found out these things. They would not be able to know because people stopped sharing needles, and that's what they thought they needed to do. But there was more that were unseen, right? So the idea is that if you're interviewing that person and you ask them, do you share needles? They say no. They don't have the knowledge base to know that if they share the water or they share the spoon or they share the cotton filters, they will transmit diseases. But you as a researcher who's an expert in this field, you know this. You know the health implications of this. You just didn't know that that's what they were doing. Why? Because that's not what they told you. Because you didn't know what they were doing, and they didn't know that they were doing something that they shouldn't be doing, right? We don't know what we don't know, especially as the participant. But you as a researcher know more than the participant in that regard.
But as the researcher, okay, you ask them, do you share needles? They say no. Then wouldn't, to dig deeper, wouldn't you then maybe say, do you guys share spoons?
No.
Do you guys
Not
Well, that's
necessarily,
the initial question.
because you never thought of it, right? Most of the researchers are not drug users themselves. And based on the observations they've done
I thought you said the researcher is an expert, I thought.
in the field of healthcare,
Oh,
but they're not an expert in using drugs,
I see.
which is why, like, when you enter into that field, you know, so the theories are separate, right? So you know the implications of someone sharing water with someone else that is sick, okay? As an expert in that field, they know, but they just didn't put two and two together. The reason why they didn't put two and two together because they didn't know that that is a behavior that's being done. Okay? So when they went into the field and they actually observed people taking drugs and not sharing needles as they were not supposed to because they knew that they shouldn't share them, but sharing, they realized that the health implications are still there because people weren't just sharing needles, they were sharing cotton, they were sharing whatever spoons, whatever it is that they needed to prepare the drugs. Does that make sense? Okay. So they found the entire thing is that they found that out by observing. If they didn't observe, if they didn't go in and actively be there to interact with them, they would not have
Know that they use
Exactly.
spoons and cotton.
exactly. And when we talk about participation, research participants or participant observation, we're not talking about you becoming, if you are observing criminals or gang members, we're not telling you to, as a researcher, that you should become a gang member, right? So you don't take on their traits, you just live in that community enough for you to understand what are their norms and what are, the things that make them who they are.
Kind of like how undercover cops do.
Well, yes, but undercover cops don't tell the participants that they are observing them, right?
Of course not.
Yeah, but they do collect data on the behaviors of the mobs, on the behavior of the gangs and who's their leaders and how they react to certain things. That would be exactly what it is. It's just not disclosed. So as a result of what they found, they decided to implement educational campaigns addressing indirect sharing and reducing the transmission. So essentially, they took on the study because they realized that even after their campaigns and even after the people themselves were telling them we are not sharing needles, the test results ended up being the same. The amount of diseases that were being transferred or the amount of cases that were being reported was the same before and after. But once they went in and did the observation, they realized that there was something different, and that led them to educate the people who are drug users on the fact that they should not be sharing not only needles, but cotton and whatever other things. Cool? All right, so participation observation is important in qualitative research when it comes to exploratory stages of the study. And what it does, it allows the researcher to gain firsthand insights on behavior, social dynamics, and contexts that shape the lives of the people they are studying. It's also uncovers hidden or unexpected patterns that may not be visible through other research, and it develops a holistic understanding. Again, here we are looking for data that is different, right? That is unique. And so you're looking at this would be important when you are studying things like societies that are really hard to reach. Okay. So social behavior of marginalized groups, emerging cultural trends. It'd be really important to use that when you are trying to uncover hidden stigmas that are so embedded, bless you, that you really would not look into it, right? So things like the drug use or underground economies, they're things that are really hard to get people to speak up about, right? Or to get interviews about, or things like that. But when you have participant observation, it is different. All right. This is what we talked about within the health one that we used. Sorry. So in mixed method research, participants observation is very important. And so typically, whenever you're doing a study, it's never just really qualitative or quantitative. It's ideally a mix of both quantitative and qualitative research to really gain a comprehensive understanding of the people that you are researching. So participant observation can be used either in exploratory research phase to understand the phenomenon that you are trying to understand, or in the explanatory phase to clarify certain things. So if you're trying to explore what aspects that you need to study, you can use observation. Or if you're trying to explain a particular phenomenon, you can use observation. Okay, so an example in a study on manufacturing workflow, participant observation might be used to understand inefficiencies or cultural dynamics that qualitative research or quantitative research may miss. Okay. Questions so far? Clear? All right. So some of the limitations, it's time consuming. It is practitioner sensitive, so findings can be dependent on the observer's perspective. And so if you place two different people in this classroom trying to understand the dynamic between, student-teacher relationships, each person might explain it a little bit different. Does that make sense? Okay. Why? Because each person is observing from their perspective. And so those are some of the limitations. And generalization, because the sample size is often small and context specific. That means that the finding may not be general, okay? You may end up encountering people that don't really necessarily represent the entirety of the community that you're trying to study. Make sense? Yeah? Yeah. How are we feeling? Alive?
Just like as
Beautiful.
I'm listening to this, I'm kind of getting certain, visions in my, like, for example, like what you're saying right here about sometimes participants might or might not, it depends on if they want to participate. I just thought of the old HBO documentary on Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman. I mean, he was already in jail for life, so he doesn't really care. He sat down in an interview and they asked him about his career as a mafia hitman. And he just explained things in general, like, yeah, I killed maybe about 100 people. I mean, the way he would say it, he would say it like it's a normal everything day thing to do. I mean, he was just that cold, you know, but he was already in jail. He didn't care.
That's it, because to him it was normal, right?
It was. I mean, it was just.
And those are the nuance. It was the nuances that to understand. That's actually a great example.
I mean, it's a really good documentary.
Nice.
Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman.
Um,
Mafia hit, he's dead. He was arrested back in the late 80s.
wow.
It took a lot of guys to take him down, because he's a big,
Oh,
6'5", 300 pounds.
My gosh. Okay, no. Big in size, not big in, not just big in power. All right, so how to conduct participant observation? Well, that requires flexibility, my friends, and understanding that it's not bound by rigid rules. So instead, you as a researcher have to adapt to that situation based on objectives of the study and the context that you are working with. So you have to have flexible data collection, which means that you should remain open to collecting a wide range of data, from notes to interviews to behavior analysis. Adaptability, again, very important. The method is guideline based, so meaning that while there is best practices, you as a researcher need to adjust depending on the scenario that's playing out in front of you, right? And then contextual approach is the focus on immersion and understanding the behavior with its natural environment. Okay, choosing the research venue is also crucial because the location determines the sample and the quality of the data and the relevance to the research questions. So the venue should be where the behavior and activities are naturally happening. Again, the real environment. If you're trying to observe people in a classroom, you don't take them to the park, right? You put them in a classroom. Scale matters, or you go to their classroom. Scale matters, so the scale of the research, the number of venues, the geographic scope should be proportionate to the research objective and availability of resources. And questions to ask when choosing this place is, where does this activity occur? Is it time specific or constant? Is one location more representative? Do you need multiple sites? Are there ethical or practical concerns of being there? Sometimes you can create venues or artificial spaces for people, but when the natural settings are unsafe for you as a researcher to be, okay? If you're studying, again, gangs, it may not be very research friendly to go and be right in the middle of the gunfire, right? So usefulness, so in cases where natural environments are dangerous, war zones, high crime areas, setting a simulated environment can provide useful data. Some potential drawbacks to having this is that it introduces an artificial elements that don't necessarily replicate real life conditions. And so it has its own bias. And then the consideration is that you have to carry out, or you have to weigh out the advantages or disadvantages of you being in the field. Okay? You can't recreate a war zone. And you also cannot replicate the fear that someone would fear when they are in a war zone. Make sense? All right. Some ethical considerations. Ethics matter. Obviously, you should have and adhere to a particular guideline. So you have to maintain respect for all the participants, avoid manipulation, and ensure that research is conducted with integrity. You're not trying to lure someone into what you believe to be right. You're trying to understand what it is that they're trying to say. You can't recreate unethical scenarios. So it's critical to avoid creating or recreating situations that can harm participants or violate ethical standards. And always prioritize ethical conduct in research. So ethical principles should guide all actions with participant observations. And lastly, If you're doing something, seek out the institutional review board's approval when necessary. Okay, so if you're doing something within the university, we seek out their approval. Okay. Adapting to research needs is so that participant observation must align with the goal of the research that you're trying to do, because it's easy to kind of get sidetracked. Yeah, we have those in the conversations all the time. So you have to reel it back. So you have to make sure that you are always aligning it with your research goal. And so you can customize things, but always bring it back. Adapt the guideline of your research to context. Okay. So each study will have its own contextual factors and should shape how the participant observation is conducted. And consider the project scale, the resources, and ethical considerations. So you have to take into account the project, the available resources, and any ethical challenges that you might face as you're doing this. And finally, flexibility is the strength of participant observations. You have to be able to adapt and you have to be flexible. How are we doing so far?
Pretty self-explanatory.
All right. Okay. Okay. We talked about these things already. I feel like it repeated. All right, my friends. That is it for this particular lecture. We'll be with you. If you're watching this later, you can watch the next lecture in the next